So what was your role during the DNC?
My role during the DNC was dignitary protection. I actually had covered the mayor throughout the whole DNC, and so wherever the mayor went, I went with him, and also talked to the other dignitaries who were coming into the city.
And you were pretty close to the Obamas.
Yes, during that time we were, yes.
Describe that, sort of the proximity.
Well, it was good, you know, because they had came inside Charlotte before and we talked, and then saw the First Lady, Miss Obama, Michelle, out at Ballantyne, and they had an event out there, and we kind of kid about the food and all of that. And so for me, it was a lifelong experience, a dream.
So you were, because you were in charge of protecting the mayor, what was your role in protecting the president or in being in touch with the Secret Service?
Well, Secret Service, you know, it is actually their party in our home or in our house. And so we worked very closely with them. It was a great relationship. Total respect on both sides. We worked very well together. And so we had to know who was coming in, who was leaving, who's at certain events. When we get to the events with the mayor, who was at that events. And then you had to talk to the other agents and anybody who's covering anybody else. And of course, it was multiple security teams. Somebody brought their team in and we had to make sure and vet them out to make sure that they were good.
So what was it like being so close to the president during a convention like that?
Very chaotic. Sometimes nerve-wracking. People come in and everybody believes because of their status, they should be able to come in. A governor thinks he can come in, you know, a mayor believes that he can come in, and you just can't, you know, during that time. And security is paramount during that time, and we have to be cautious of that.
How would you describe, I try to tell people who didn't live in Charlotte at the time that you literally had to walk city blocks before you could just cross the street because of the barricades. How would you describe what security was like back then?
It was very tight. It was unbelievable. I've never been to, you know, any security detail like that. We had, you know, the core ring, and then we had the outer ring, and so you had to have your car inspected every day. Even though we transported the mayor around, or I transported, my car was inspected every day, you know. Went over with the dog, checked the hook, checked the trunk, and everything else. So you can't take anything for granted. When I parked my car at night, I had to walk 5 or 6 blocks to my hotel and come back and get my car in that morning and have it vetted out again. And so we were accustomed to it at the time. I know I never had the maid to clean my room when I was living downtown. I was just back and forth the whole time.
How would you describe what the city looked like in general as far as security? Security
in the city, we planned for that. During that time, Chief Monroe did a great job. We went to other cities, see what they were doing well and see what they did not do well. Part of my job was also to talk to the protesters, people who wanted to demonstrate. And I think that was the key. We got good feedback from a lot of people. We brought the humanity part into it. We had great conversation. If you're going to scale a building and come down with a balloon, you know, about 15 minutes, you made your statement. So come on down and talk to us about it. So we had a good relationship during that time.
One of the things I think people still talk about is the fact that the approach to the protesters back then during the DNC was to actually march with them rather than focusing on arresting them. And I think a lot of people would say that helped keep the peace.
It did. We talked to them prior to coming. You know, I don't want to call some organization's name, but we talked to some of the organizers of the protesters. We had their phone numbers. They had our phone numbers. And we built true relationships with them prior to the DNC. And had the conversation. I remember one young lady was telling me why she was protesting and why she was so adamant, why she had to do it. And I understood that. And we had a relationship, so when her group came out, you checked on them. They did what they supposed to do, protest. And in the mornings, I remember going back and making sure if anybody was arrested that night, here's the number to call to find out if they can bail them out or bond them out. And it was a relationship. So we built great relationships during that time.
And remind people what kind of protesters they were. It was anonymous. It was a different feel than the type of protests I imagine they're expecting this time around.
Yeah, you know, we had the people who did sit-ins or die-ins or occupied, you know, go to a place and put up the tents and everything and stayed. We weren't worried about that much violence. We were just worried about a lot of protesting, shutting everything down, causing congestion, and things like that. I think we're going to be worried about a different frame this time.
So let's talk about that. What can we expect, do you think, this time around?
Well, I think you have to look at America, to be honest, and if anybody says they're not nervous, that would be a statement I would challenge them with. You look at the climate of America now. You look at what's in the media every day. What we worry about, or what I worry about, is that lone wolf who's just sitting at home in the bottom of a basement. You have an 18-year-old teenager in Ohio, 25 guns and over 10,000 rounds. Somebody knew that many guns in the house. Somebody knew that many rounds in the house. That's a lone wolf. So when we talk about gun laws and background checks and everything else, that's great. But when we're talking to that person who believes a little bit stronger than my belief or somebody else's belief, and at that time he can make a statement. We've seen that in Ohio, we've seen that in El Paso, and we're going to continue to see that. That is something that we definitely need to be concerned about.
You're concerned that something could potentially happen here in Charlotte during the RNC like that?
Yes, I am. I mean, if somebody says they're not, that's their opinion. I've been in law enforcement long enough to say, okay, this is a part that I am concerned. Great convention, hope it will be a great convention, that it is not an incident happening, but you have to be concerned about it.
What can Charlotte do to keep it safe?
I think we need to start having conversations more than, to talking heads. We're going to say, if you know something, see something, say something. If you see something's going on, every time we have one of these incidents, someone comes forward later and said, I knew that person. I saw the dark side of that person. One of the girlfriends of one of these recent shootings said on her first date, this is what her boyfriend showed her. On her first date, this is what he talked about. On their first date, they saw guns. They saw all the signs, but nobody was contacted, no authorities. And I think if we started seeing that more, we can be more helpful. So
to be clear though, you're concerned about a mass shooting during the RNC?
I'm clear about violence during the RNC. And of course, yes, it's a time for somebody to make a statement. I'm concerned. If somebody says they're not concerned, that'll be their opinion.
So Uptown Charlotte, obviously it's a business hub. What's your best advice for people? I mean, obviously the big companies, we can assume they'll have their people work from home, but there's lots of smaller businesses. What's your best advice for people?
Start having the conversations with your employees. Start having conversation with your staff. Start having the conversations that you probably don't want to have. Have the conversation about what you see on the news. Have the conversations and listen to your employees about their lives, about things going on in their lives and everything else.
What will your role as sheriff be during the RNC?
Well, we're trying to define some of that. We have a detention center. If there's a mass arrest, we're going to have to take care of it. We are creating or have created a dignitary protection team that is being trained, and I think they're in their third or fourth stage of being trained now, and they're taking the driving, they're taking the active roles of how to protect dignitaries.
Is that sheriff's deputies going through that? Or?
There's a sheriff deputies doing that as we speak.
And is it CMPD? Is it a joint thing?
Well, it's not joint, but I'm hoping for it to be joint. I came from that side. Help on that side with the dignitary protection was kind of one of the first members, and so I think we're going to have a great working relationship. We've had some conversation with the sergeant, and I think that we will have to work together. It's a must that we work together.
What about the RNC? Has anyone from the RNC reached out? Are there preparations already underway?
I think there's a lot of preparation on their side. I haven't been involved in many meetings with that. Some of the local people have contacted me. We've had the conversation, great conversations, matter of fact, and I think that I'm not worried about the local, and I'm not worried about the people who are putting the RNC together. They've been very cordial. People have to say, we have friends who are non-democratic, and they are Republicans. So we have friends and family members here. So we're hoping for a great convention. We're hoping that we have nothing to report, but we have to be concerned.
Okay. Is there anything I left out that you want to add?
No. I mean, I think we have to have the conversations. I think that we have to have the conversations, have the what ifs. How prepared are we? The climate of America is going to change much, much more by the time we get to next year, I believe. We can see it now.
In what way?
I think it's very hostile. I think the letters that are coming out, the violence has been displayed. So we have to be concerned, and we talk about it in background checks and guns. We kind of ease it away with that. We need more background checks and more laws and everything else, but we have to prepare the human mind also for this.